Hello everyone and welcome back to Fundamentals to Speed, aka my free course to learning sim racing as a beginner. I'm OSW-Sim-Sports and this is Block 2, Driving Fundamentals. And so in Block 1 we covered vision, where to look and how to identify markers and references. For this video I'm just going to assume you know all this information. But if some of this stuff is still a bit unclear to you, please go check out the previous video, Vision. But today we are making it a bit more exciting because we are actually jumping in the car and driving. And a bit more specifically, we are just going to be focusing on the three most fundamental inputs: steering, throttle, braking. That's it. Now, because we are in a car with a gearbox, you will also have to shift gears, but if you are not comfortable with it yet, it is absolutely fine to set it to automatic for this part of the video. We are not going to be using the clutch, we won't be rev matching, and we won't be blipping and all that sort of stuff. All of that can come later, and maybe even never, because most modern racing cars have sequential gearboxes that basically automate this entire process for you. And so what's the reason for keeping it this simple? Simply put, just these three inputs, steering, braking and throttle, can take years and years to master. And I'm seriously trying to avoid completely overwhelming you by piling on too much stuff at once. As essentially this entire course has built on the philosophy of building up fundamentals first and only then focusing on small stuff that can give small advantages. 95% of the pace you will have on track will come from these three fundamental inputs anyway. The little tricks and advanced techniques, that is what Block 3, driving technique, is for. But for now, let's just make sure you can do some laps, you can do them cleanly, and you can drive around the track safely and enjoyably. And what is a bit deceptive is that these three things, steering, throttle and braking, seem simple enough, but in reality, your brain has to coordinate what you are seeing, it has to coordinate what your hands and what your feet are doing, it has to coordinate what the car is feeling and what you are seeing from the car, and you have to do all of this in real time without thinking too much about it. And this to me is very similar to juggling a bunch of balls. You don't start off with 5 balls right away, you start off with 2 or 3. And similar to juggling, if you really want to get comfortable and make what you are doing completely natural, this will take hundreds if not thousands of repetitions. But with some guided practice and a decent level of understanding of what you are looking for when driving the car, you can speed up this process massively. And here's what we will be covering today. First, I'm going to do a demonstration run, 5 laps, building from conservative to pushing the limit, plus one more lap where I push deliberately past that limit. And then we will break down exactly what happened, slow-mo replays, analyzing the inputs, and going through my thought process, both what I was thinking and doing at each moment while driving. And after that, we will take a look at some laps from one of my friends, who is around the novice level but has kindly supplied me with a replay which will give us great insight into small but common mistakes that cost time, and of course some tricks to overcome them. And finally, I'll give you a specific practice challenge to work on. Think of it as your homework, but it will be something that will build race pace, not just hot lap pace. And this is essentially the hand and feet coordination rabbit hole that we are diving headfirst into. Football might seem simple, but you are not Messi or Ronaldo. Baseball might seem simple, but you're also not Ohtani or Babe Ruth. And also, racing and by extension sim racing might seem simple, but we are not Max Verstappen or Lewis Hamilton. To get to their level, you have to be insanely talented, a bit lucky, practice hard and consistently, and invest so much time into your passion that you will push well beyond the point of diminishing returns. There's literally no particular reason Max is doing iRacing endurance stints in the middle of F1 race weekends. This is just what he does and what he is, a racing driver. And the same thing can be said for Messi, who is known to, after playing a match, returning home to play football with his dogs. But here's the fun thing you should always keep in the back of your mind while you are still learning. You can get into 5, 3 or maybe even 1% of their lap time with only a fraction of the time invested learning, and have the same amount of fun and most likely even more while doing it. And only when you start first sim racing yourself, you most likely realize how difficult it actually is and how impossible and daunting it seems to get to the level of the pros and the top split runners. But the top guys have to spend hours upon hours in testing sessions to find 0.05 of a second of pace, and meanwhile a beginner or novice is improving their lap time by a full second every hour for the first days. And yes, I do want to acknowledge that closing the gap to the 0.001% guys, the top of the world guys, is most likely impossible unless you are young, talented and have a ton of time. But actually getting to the top 1 or 2% is very much possible, even for a total beginner who picks up sim racing later in their life purely as a hobby, even when you only have an hour a day to race. And I guarantee that you will be surprised if you take up sim racing casually but consistently, how much and how quickly you will improve over the course of 3 months, 6 months, a year or maybe 3. Going from a total beginner to a competent mid-split driver, and maybe you will be battling for top split after a while. And the number one thing I want you to keep in mind is to not be discouraged. Accept mistakes, embrace learning, and that will lead to continuous improvement. I have seen too many times where someone takes up sim racing, invests a bunch of money, and then when it actually comes down to driving, they are intimidated and stop driving after a few weeks, leaving the hobby before they had any good and fun races. But here comes another harsh truth. I can show you how to drive and build up over 5 laps, but I simply cannot give you the hand-eye coordination to execute on it. That is where your own elbow grease will come into play. The point of doing this demonstration is to show my mental approach, my methodology to learning, and my driving style. And this style can be very easily summarized with a couple of famous clichés. Slow in, fast out, and smooth is fast. With cars that have relatively low power, like the Mazda MX-5, the key to going quick is to drive efficient, avoiding slides, avoiding drastic inputs, and without making major corrections. Each slide will either cost you 3/10 or you just ruin your lap entirely. Making drastic inputs can unsettle the car, making it harder or even impossible to follow the correct trajectory with speed. And having to make major corrections will force you to go on the throttle later than optimal. And this also then comes back to my underdriving approach to build up pace. Effective practice comes from repeated laps at consistent, progressive pace, not being off track all the time because you're pushing too hard, too quickly. But here is something important to remember too. I'm about to show you building pace in 5 laps. 5 laps just because it makes for a good demonstration. But 5 laps for a beginner to build pace is completely unrealistic. The reality is that without me trying to humble brag, I have simply 20 years of experience, I have driven this exact combo on many different games, and most of the things I am about to show you are 100% natural and subconscious to me. I just don't even think about it, I just do it. Some stuff that is very easy for me, but might be very difficult for a beginner in the beginning, is for example smooth braking application, using all of the road on entry, catching the car when it gets loose on braking, and feathering the throttle in a way that keeps the car stable on corner exit. All of these things are very small, They are small details, but I just subconsciously do them, but you in the beginning might really have to focus on them. And that is absolutely fine. That is what learning is for. Right. And with all of that said, let's now finally jump into the car and do some driving, shall we? For the track and car selection, we will be using the Mazda MX-5 at Laguna Seca Raceway. And to actually try the combination of using the Mazda at the Laguna Seca track, luckily we have quite a few options. And so let's just go over them one by one. If you have the money to spare and you want to go racing, I think iRacing presents the best option. It's super easy to find MX-5 races at any day of the week and you get the Mazda MX-5 plus all of the tracks you will race on in the rookie leagues for free with the game subscription. If you can find a nice discount, having iRacing just for the online MX-5 racing alone is worth it in my opinion. But I don't want to recommend monthly subscriptions for beginners, so that's why I'm discounting it for this list. And then we have another offering, which in my opinion is a very good one if you are on low-end systems, and that is Race Room Racing Experience, which you can download and play for free, but almost all of the content that you will actually want to play is locked behind a paywall. But luckily all of it is a one-time payment and you will never need to buy a subscription in order to access it. It also drives excellent and it has online racing. And the only reason why I'm not recommending this title higher on the list is that even though the tracks are paid at up to 4 or 5 euros per track, they are not laser scanned. And in 2025 that feels a bit weird. Next on the list is Automobilista 2, which if you are playing in VR is very highly recommended. This is truly one of the strengths of this game. It also looks amazing, has no monthly subscription, it also has a very fair price in my opinion. But because it's built on the Madness engine, it also has some very weird sliding physics, which will be pretty much hidden by driving the MX-5, but really come to the fore if you're driving a Formula car or a prototype or something like that. You can also find online racing through LFM and other services, but it doesn't have a giant player base and that is why I'm not recommending it. And then we have Kuno Simulation's title, Assetto Corsa Evo. And while I'm sure this will be a great game in the long run, as for now I cannot recommend it. At least not in its current state. And then for the console players, there is Gran Turismo 7 if you have a PlayStation. Sadly, I don't have any consoles, I only have a PC, so I cannot show any gameplay from this console. But from what I have seen from Gran Turismo, the gameplay is absolutely fine. It's just a little bit simplified in some senses, but there is still a lot of fundamentals you can actually learn from playing Gran Turismo. And then lastly, we have Forza Motorsport, which in my opinion, I have never played it, but I know some people that do play it. It plays quite well, it's a bit slidey, the physics are a bit weird. You can still have some fun in it though, and if you have a Game Pass for example, it can be worth a try. And while I'm sure I'm forgetting a bunch of titles, I think the absolute best option in terms of value for money and what you actually get, that's right baby, it's the original. It's 11 years old at this point, but it doesn't matter, it still drives great. And with the Content Manager extension, which is extremely easy to install, so much so that you don't even have to install it, you can configure and mod the game in a way where you can experience almost anything you can imagine, with the game also looking like a modern racing title if you set up the mods correctly. Now actually setting up Content Manager and stuff is beyond the scope of this video sadly, but if you would like me to show you how to get set up, please let me know in the comments. And the absolute best part, both the Mazda MX-5 and Laguna Seca come with the base variant of the game, which you can sometimes find for 4 or 5 bucks, and you can directly buy it on Steam for 20 bucks. And on top of that, the track is also laser scanned, so you are driving on a very accurate track model. And with a one-time payment of 4 to 5 euros, no subscriptions to worry about, I think this is the best deal available. As a single-player practice and testing tool, Assetto Corsa is awesome. As for the difficulty/simulation settings we are actually using, it's simply set to Pro, but with auto blip and automatic clutch enabled. As almost all race cars later down the line you might want to learn will have both automatic clutching and auto blipping by default, at least for ups and downshifts while driving. So maybe clutching and rev matching is something you want to learn down the line. For now, it's absolutely fine to just skip it completely. And as far as the session setup goes, feel free to copy this. We are using the MX-5 Cup and not the street variant. But before we jump into the car, let's have a quick look at the combo we will be driving. Laguna Seca is truly one of the USA's iconic tracks, with its awesome hairpin T1 and the super famous corkscrew corner. And the height difference in this corner is not to be underestimated, just look at that. And the name Laguna Seca is not for nothing, as it literally means dry lake. As for actually driving this track, it's all about commitment, and with the Mazda MX-5 it will really challenge your fundamentals, while also providing a nice mixture of corners and lap times that are very reasonable, so you actually have the time to practice and improve. And with its introduction out of the way, let's actually jump into the car and start driving now. And remember, I'm focusing on smooth, efficient driving. Slow in, fast out, smooth is fast. And be sure to watch the inputs on screen, especially the braking, and look how gentle and progressive everything is in the first few laps. And so here we finally are in the Miata on Laguna Seca. Let's just make sure everything is working correct. Check the throttle, check the braking, make sure everything works smooth. Adjust your steering sensitivity to something that makes sense to you. If you have a Formula wheel, your sensitivity will be lower. And if you have a round wheel like the Mazda itself has, your sensitivity will most likely be higher. Sadly, everyone's configuration will be a little bit different, so I cannot really help you with that. So I'm assuming from this point onwards you have configured everything to a point where you are feeling comfortable, both with your FOV and with your settings. And let's just now go out on track and actually drive some laps. We have tire warmers enabled, so we can already push it quite a bit. But as you can see from the inputs, I'm taking it not necessarily slowly, but very smoothly. For example, here I'm lifting very early, letting the car coast through the corner, and once I'm feeling comfortable again, I go back on the throttle. And here, because I'm assuming we don't know the braking markers, I'm lifting very early, braking very softly, and then just keeping my speed and coasting through the corner once I'm feeling comfortable. And here we have a blind corner, so I'm just lifting very early. Once I see the apex of the corner, I just steer it in, go back on the throttle. Nice and smooth, no jerky movements, no sliding around, no wheel spin. Just keep it smooth. And here again we are just lifting very early, braking very softly very early again, and once we see the apex we just turn into it. And this specific part of the corkscrew will take some learning, as it is really a feeling thing, but you will get the hang of it slowly. Maybe I'm going a bit quick here, but yeah, just lift and just let the car rotate into the corner. Here the same principle again. And please also note how I'm using almost all of the road on lap 1 already. And here we are for the final corner. I'm establishing the 2 marker as our braking marker for now. And now we are on the main straight for the first time. Here you will see that the MX-5 is a pretty slow car when it comes to top speed, but in the corners it is pretty damn rapid for a car without any downforce. And so here we are coming into T1, very tricky corner, lifting early, braking very early at the 3 marker this time. And as you can see, we just have more than enough time. We come into the corner a bit slowly. We try to go for the late apex, which we managed to do correctly. Here we are aiming for the 2 sign, lifting off, a very slight tap on the brake, steering into the corner and smoothly back on the throttle. And here we just repeat the exact same process. We give a little tap on the brake, we steer it into the corner and we go back on the throttle, nice and smooth. And if you are still having to develop a bit of feel with the car, just weaving a little bit on the straight can really help you feel the force feedback and feel what it's doing under weight transfer. As we smoothly come out of this corner, coming up the hill, Again, feeling the weight of the car a little bit, just feeling the force feedback. Here we lift nice and early, little bit braking, one downshift and we go back on the throttle. And simply judging by how much room we still had left on the exit, we can take that corner a lot quicker. Here we are for the corkscrew, braking nice and early until we see the marker, making sure to get the car stopped, turning into the apex, left, then right and going on the throttle as soon as we start going downhill. Here we want to go from the outside to the inside and all the while just lift as long as you don't have the car stable and not rotated properly. Here again we keep applying the smooth principles, we lift a little bit, we brake not too hard and we go on the throttle nice and smooth. Here again aiming for the number 2 marker, rotate the car and on the throttle nice and early, we can keep it in second. And there was still some room on the exit so we could go a little bit quicker, but this was just a banker lap and we already have a 1:48.6 and we know we can push it a bit harder coming into T1, so yeah, let's just do that. On the brakes a little bit harder this time, a little bit later this time. And this time we kind of are correctly judging the entry speed. We don't have to correct. And that was already a lot quicker. Here again, brake after the 2 board, turn around the apex, not into it. Use all of the road on the outside. Line the car up for the next one. Just lift this time, no braking and on the throttle nice and early again. It might not seem like it to the untrained eye, but we are already carrying tons more speed. Here again, line it up on the outside, brake at the 2 board, keep it smooth, don't brake too hard. Roll it into the corner and as soon as you are feeling that you are making the corner, back on the throttle. Here we are for the blind corner again. We will lift a little bit and on the brake a little bit, but yeah, we can go even quicker. We can maybe even keep it in 4th there. Back up the hill we go towards the corkscrew. As it is a left and then a right, we want to line it up on the right hand of the track, which we do correctly. Smoothly brake, downshift down into second, steer it into the corner and as soon as we start going downhill we are back on the brake. Lined it up on the outside here. Maybe I'm going a bit tight, but we are carrying a lot more speed, so that is very good. Here we are braking at the 2 board again, nice and smooth, turn it around the apex and on the throttle again. First time we had a little bit of a slide on. Here again we brake at the 2 board, down into second, we turn it into the corner, hit the apex and back on the throttle. Use all of the road on the outside and we are on the main straight again. And while we did basically the same actions, we just changed the timing and with that we have gained 5 seconds already. Just carrying a bit more speed here and there. And let's be a little bit braver again. Brake at the 3 marker, this time a little bit harder. Overshoot the corner a little bit so we get a nice late apex. Once we see the second apex we go back on the throttle. And that looked like a very nice T1. And here, because we are braking a little bit later, we are also braking a little bit harder and being a little bit more aggressive on the entry. And this is the first corner where we are going a little bit wide because we are carrying so much speed. The speed was correct, but we just need to turn in a little bit earlier there. And here we can brake a little bit later if we trail into the corner nicely. And as you can see, I keep a little bit of braking while turning into the corner. That allows me to rotate the car nicely, go back on the throttle nice and early. Here for the uphill part again. This time we don't lift, it's just a little tap of the brake, we send it into the corner and once we feel the car stabilize with our hands, we go back on the throttle again. Again, uphill, up to the corkscrew, we line it up on the right side of the track, we brake hard, down to second, we steer it into the corner and as soon as we start going downhill we go back on the throttle, line it up on the right hand side. And while the audio is glitching a little bit, we are trying to be a little bit more aggressive here. We barely lifted there. That also means we have to brake a little bit more here. We slide it through the corner nicely, but there's still a little bit more road to use on the outside. Here we are braking at the 2 marker again, down into second, touch the apex, back on the throttle and use all of the road. And so this was the first lap where we were becoming a little bit more aggressive. Let's see how much time it has gained us. And it's only 7/10. So from now on the gains will be more incremental. But there is still more in the tank if we push a little bit more. This time we go past the 3 marker. We go brake a little bit harder. This time we get a bit of a slide on, but we also get excellent rotation coming through T1. We control the slide. We brake after the 2 board again, barely at the 1 board. We still managed to make the corner and on the throttle very early this time. Here we just lift again a little bit and back on the throttle. Very good. We basically perfectly judged the entry and exit speed there. And we are now heading up to the trail braking corner. Very high in the revs, past the two board, trail brake into the corner a little bit, one downshift and back on the throttle. Use all of the road on the outside, so we are carrying a lot of speed again. This time we are gonna be brave here and brake even less. We are not braking at all, we are just doing a lift and somehow we are still keeping it on the track, so there's a little bit more in the tank there. And just listening to the revs you can hear we are going quicker. Line it up on the right hand side, keep the car smooth and stable, turn it into the corner, and as soon as we go downhill back on the throttle again. Here we have to force ourselves to steer in late. As you can see, I am struggling to do so, but I managed to do it, and that allows us to keep the throttle basically pinned. Here brake at the 2 marker. We get a perfect rotation through the corner and look how nicely we use all of the road on the outside there. Brake past the 2 board here, use a little bit of the ABS, you can hear the tires squealing, they are really working now. And now back on the main straight, let's see how quick our 4th lap will be. This time we carried a bit more speed everywhere and we braked a little bit later and it gained us 1.5 seconds. We are now in the 1:41.0, but there is still more in the tank, this time trying to use even more of the road. Trying to keep the car balanced while it's also on the limit, trying to get it rotated nicely. Maybe I shifted up a little bit late there, but it's still alright. A small tap on the brake for the rotation, we pitch it in and then we go back on the throttle. You could just hear that we nailed it from the revs. Here we are in 4th, we just lift a little bit, chuck it into the corner, back on the throttle. There's a little bit more in the tank there, but we have to extract it. Heading up to the trail braking corner again. Maybe last time we went a little bit wide. This time a little bit tighter maybe, and let's see, yeah, perfect. We get it rotated nicely, back on the throttle nice and early. Notice also we are keeping our revs very high. And here we just lift a little bit and then we chuck it in the corner, minimize the distance, back on the throttle nice and early. Carry the speed all the way up the hill. Line the car up on the left hand side of the track, then on the right hand side of the track. Brake quite early, chuck it into the corner. The car will want to float a little bit there, but you will have to start getting a feeling for it. Here we turn in late again, but still honestly it's too early. We do barely have to lift, so we carry nice amount of speed. We trail brake into the corner here, one downshift, bam, back on the throttle, very nice. And here also let's brake a little bit later. We can hear the ABS engaging a little bit, but we still make the corner, so it's all good. On the throttle nice and early again, maximizing all of the road on the exit. And let's see if we have improved once again. This time we just tightened up everything a little bit and boom, there's 7 tenths more in the tank. And let's see if we can go under the 140s. This time really going full send, only braking at the 2 marker. Really compromising our entry for the late apex, and so we can get on the throttle nice and early. We even touch a little bit of the sand, but it's all good, we don't have to lift. Small tap on the brakes, but we keep it smoother, we slide less, that is important. Here also I just want to keep it pinned this time. And let's see what I do. A very small lift to keep the trajectory through the corner correct, and as you can see it was the right choice, but we are still carrying a ton of speed. Here I'm braking even later and trying more to keep the car balanced and not sliding while still carrying the speed, and as you can see we are able to do so. Using all of the road on the outside, we have a ton of revs, already shifted up to 4th. We just chuck it in here, we barely lift, just balls to the wall. Up the hill again with our naturally aspirated engine revving and singing. Coming under the Mazda banner, we line it up on the right hand side, brake hard, downshift aggressively, just barely slide it into the corner, control the car early on throttle again, set up the car nicely for the next corner. This time we stay on the outside nicely, barely lift, very small lift. Set it up on the outside again, very smooth braking, one quick downshift, back on throttle, use all of the road on the outside. Heading up to the 2 marker, brake a little bit after it, bam, hard on the brake, downshift to 2. And on the throttle again, even before the apex. And as we are heading towards the line, let's see what our Qualy-Style Lap has brought us, where we went just full push. And bam, we are half a second faster again. And this is now the point where we start overdriving to see if there's anything more in the tank. We brake even later, brake even harder. We go more aggressive on the entry, even earlier on the throttle again. This time we don't touch the gravel, so that's good as well. Here we brake even later and boom, there you go. There you see, and we are off track and our lap is basically ruined. But I really hope that with this 5 lap demonstration I have shown you how to build up pace, from going slowly and very smoothly building up pace until you're going faster and faster, until you are essentially just doing full push quali laps and start making mistakes. And then for your races, you just tone it down by 5% and you should be able to find a nice, consistent, stable pace. And so, just to recap what we did over the last 5 laps, what I was thinking, what I was focusing on, and what I want you to be focusing on, let's just break it down a little bit more. So obviously I will be assuming this will be the first time you will be driving Laguna Seca with the MX-5. So the first lap is very much deliberately underdriving, going a bit slower than normal, lifting very early and just coasting through the corners while keeping in mind to drive the perfect line. Using all of the width of the road on entry, touching the apex nicely, and then using all of the width of the road on exit again. And also when I did brake, I almost never braked more than 20% brake pressure. Just keep that in mind, you don't want to be braking hard at all in your first laps. This will only make you jerky and start-stoppy. You don't want this at all, you want to be smooth and efficient. And the number one target for your out laps and scouting laps will be 0 slides, 0 losses of control, 0 slipping, 0 big moments and 0 corrections. You just want to drive around smoothly and cleanly. And so finally, after our very conservative banker lap, we can now start to build some pace and actually push a little bit. This is essentially the building up phase that I was speaking about, and we achieve this by incrementally braking a little bit later, carrying more mid-corner speed by using lifts instead of brakes, maintaining the smoothness while the margin of error is slowly decreasing, and in just the second lap alone, we saw a 5-second improvement by just tightening up everything and just going a little bit tighter and being a bit more controlled. And after you have set your first decent, clean lap, which was very much repeatable, then we can start finally really pushing and looking for the natural limit that you have. Now obviously your natural limit will be a little bit different depending on your skill level, how good you are at controlling the car under sliding, etc. How good you are at applying the little tricks and techniques like trail braking, etc. That will be coming up in block 3, driving technique. And this is also the moment where you will start seeing minor slides here and there that you will have to correct and catch, because you are now starting to find the natural limit and maybe even pushing a little bit beyond it here and there because you are misjudging it. But my main priority in the back of my mind is still prioritizing control, finesse and smoothness over just raw speed and pushing. But there is one thing that didn't change at all during the entire driving demonstration. And that was the driving philosophy. Let's go over these cliches once again so you get them nicely stuck in the back of your mind. Slow in, fast out. Early throttle application was the absolute key here to going quick. Smoothness over aggression. From smoothness comes consistency and race pace, and from aggression your qualifying pace will come, but it will also come with more mistakes. When I had mistakes throughout the first 5 laps, they were so minor that I was both able to correct them and use them as mental calibration for the next laps. And to be honest, each lap that I was driving in the first 5 laps was answering a bunch of questions. How late can I brake here? Can I take this corner in 4th? And how early can I get back on the throttle here? How aggressive do I have to turn in? All of that sort of stuff. But instead of me just yapping about, let's look at some of the laps I've driven in a bit more detail. And so here we are back in the car for our first time coming up to Tijuana. We lift extremely early, and so much so that we barely even have to brake, only 20%, even less maybe. And this allows us to get the car basically fully stopped and ready to turn into the corner before we even arrive there. And as you can see, I have to go back on the throttle a little bit. But going too slow into a corner is way easier to correct than going too quick into a corner. And it is with the exact same approach that we approach this corner. We lift early because we don't know our braking markers. We very gently slow the car down and we are already done with braking before we even turn into the corner. As you can see, we're doing nothing here, just lifting. And this also allows us to go back on the throttle extremely early. But we simply drove the perfect line through the corner and next time we know we can push a bit harder. Now this corner is obviously blind, we cannot really see our entry, we cannot see our apex. So again, I'm just lifting very early and making sure that we don't come into the blind corner too hot and go off track. And as you can see, I come into the corner extremely conservatively, but as soon as I see the apex and I'm pretty sure that I will make the corner, I just go back on the throttle and floor it again. And here heading up the hill, it is exactly the same approach. It is a blind corner, so we are just lifting and braking very early. Now we can see the apex, we get the car turned in nicely and we make it through without any major issues. And so after having completed our scouting lap, we can now put in a banker lap. As you can see, we didn't lift extremely early this time. And while I'm still braking very gently, I'm already braking a little bit later and carrying a bit more corner speed here. But as you can quite clearly see and hear, the car is still very compliant and we can ask a bunch more of it. These are all mental notes for the next laps. And here, still in the same lap but a few corners later, you can see we didn't lift a massive amount this time. We are still braking very gently again, but we are already establishing and finding our braking markers. And here is the absolute key that makes this so effective, and with that I mean the slow in, fast out approach, is that even though we compromised quite a bit on entry, we are still carrying a ton of speed, 110 km an hour, and we are very early back on the throttle. And as a result, the engine is now in a better rev range and we are carrying a ton more speed up the hill here. And this time we know what's coming up, so we can be a little bit braver. As you can see, even before the 2 marker we are still on the throttle. And because I'm still building up, I will give a tap on the brake, but only doing that as smoothly and gently as possible. And as you can see, a very gentle tap on the brakes, we chuck it into the corner and we go back on the throttle. This now already allows us to carry a ton more speed and gain a bunch of time. And so now we have got our banker lap in, we can finally start to push. And this time you can see we are still on the throttle a bit more aggressively, a bit later, and we are applying the brakes later as well. We are also braking a little bit harder to actually slow the car down more, and this allows us to carry a very nice trajectory through the corner and carry a nice amount of speed. This time we go past the 2 marker, we go onto the brakes, but we keep it smooth, we roll it into the corner, and as you can see, instead of 110 or 104 km an hour, we are now at 114 km an hour, which is quite a big difference in such a slow car as the MX-5. And also we are back on the throttle at the apex, so we basically nailed this corner. But here you can see we drift a little bit wide on exit, but it just has to do with the steering inputs and not really with the timing or with the throttle and braking. And we have the tricky left-hander coming up here. We're going to be even braver here. We're still on full throttle, way past the 2 marker. And we are just gonna chuck it into the corner without doing any braking. And as you can see, it still sticks. And here we are for the final push lap, a qualifying style lap. And as you can see, we are using all of the road on entry. And we are braking well past the 3 marker. If we can still get the car stopped, this alone should gain us a bunch of time. And as you can see, we can barely stop the car. We do have to control it a little bit, so whether you can actually make it through the corner depends on you. And here in the braveness test, instead of not lifting at all, I just lift a little bit, but I drive a way tighter line, and that is also gaining me a bunch of time here. And here in the previous laps I didn't show it because it's the same for all the laps. I'm using all of the road on entry, then smoothly rotating the car towards the apex but not into it, and trying to use all of the road on exit, even though I could have done a better job at this. And here for the last corner we just repeat the process. We use all of the road on entry, we touch the apex, and we use all of the road on the exit to maximize exit speed. And as we are heading towards the line here, you can see that it pays off because this was our fastest lap of the session. And just quickly, before we even get into this section, I want to give a massive shout out to my sim racing friend Kulo Now, who has kindly provided me with this replay. And to actually send in a replay of yourself driving on a new track with a new car just takes a lot of balls. So my hat is off to him, and this section would simply not have been possible without his contribution. And so here we go on board with Kulo for his first scouting lap. And as you can see, he is already braking very hard. But with that, he's also just overslowing the car. And so now let's just compare this to my first lap, where I just lifted extremely early, feathered the brake. And as a result, I was carrying a bunch more speed here. I also had a nicer trajectory throughout the corner. And if we go towards the bridge to line it up and compare, you can quite clearly see that even though I'm doing some very extreme underdriving, this is still quicker than not being smooth. And so let's go over it again. And as we are heading into the braking zone, you can very easily see the difference in braking pressure. And even though I'm quite far behind at this point, as you can see, but here, before even reaching the apex, because we have turned the car in nicely and we already have it stopped, we are extremely early back on the throttle. And this will then pay off all the way down this straight. And even though I lost half a second on entry, it was still quicker. And here we are for his second lap. He's already using all of the road on entry.
Wow!
Braking quite aggressively here, but he does get the car stopped. And he mostly manages to hit the apex. But here he makes a small mistake of going back on the throttle too early, and that then makes him go a little bit deep right here, which forces him to go later on the throttle than he would have wanted. But it's a very minor mistake and it just counts as calibration. Also here, very well done.
Nice.
And also here for his scouting lap, this is exactly what you want to do, just coast it through the corner, be smooth. But here he doesn't have his priorities correct, I think, because his main priority seems to be exit speed instead of lining up for the next setup marker. And as you can see, he's coming in with a weird angle. He's also not using all of the road on entry. And he's coming in with a bunch of speed now. And honestly, with a little bit of a better line and a bit of finesse, I think he could have made this corner, even with this speed. But let's rewind the clock a little bit and see where it all went wrong for him, because this was so far a very good lap. Now, being here on the track is not necessarily bad in of itself. But you want to be 100% focusing on being already set up, ready to brake for the next corner. But in this situation he doesn't, and that leaves him very compromised. And this is another small mistake I noticed, especially in the blind corners, and obviously this is very difficult. He had a tendency to turn into the apex. And just to give you a quick comparison of how much time this actually loses, because you can go on the throttle later than you actually want, and I'm only ahead by a little bit, but as you can see I also have a ton more speed. And so here we go for the side-by-side analysis. I tried to line everything up as best as I could, and of course down the main straight here we are still very equal. He does very well in the braking zone here, and while he does drive a much tighter line here in the hairpin, which cost him a bit of speed, but I dropped the wheel on the sand, so we are basically equal as you can see at this point here. But here I make a big difference because I turn around the corner and he turns into the corner, and as a result I was a bit quicker in that corner. But maybe it was a bit difficult to see what he was doing wrong, so let's go over it once again. And it all has to do with the moment of entry. Because he steers quite early into the corner, his line is steering into the apex, and meanwhile I'm essentially trying to force myself to stay on the outside for as long as I feel comfortable with, even a little bit longer to be honest. And as you can see, that pays off because I can go back on throttle much earlier than Kulo. And because of that I'm ahead by quite a bit here. And now with the car synced up again into this tricky right-hander, this time he's using all of the road, and yeah, nicely done, but he could have gone back on throttle a little bit earlier there and carried a bit more speed. As you can see, that did cost him quite a bit. And here he's doing almost everything right, but he can just go back on the throttle a bit more aggressively and he would have gained a bunch more time here. And in these type of corners that really hurts, because all the way up the hill, as you can see, you are losing speed and that will cost you a bunch of time. And here it's exactly the same. He's doing everything correctly, but he can be a little bit more brave on the accelerator and that would gain him a bunch more time again. As you can see, it's about a tenth, 2/10 maybe. And now coming up to the corkscrew, and it is remarkable how good he is at this corner. Just look at that, almost perfect, just perfect basically. And we are basically neck and neck for this section. My only critique would have been to be a little bit wider on entry, but he's still carrying very good speed through the corner. And the only thing that's costing him here is essentially that he's on the throttle less than I am. And here, this is the biggest thing that is costing him time. He is still compromising himself a little bit, and you can just hear it in the revs here that I'm a bit quicker, I'm upshifting quicker, and yeah, just carrying a bit more speed. And now for the last corner, let's see. He chucks it into the corner nicely, back on the throttle nicely, and yeah, he just does very well. And we both head towards the line with our best laps, and let's see just what the difference will be. And as you can see, while it is not immediately obvious, all of these small, minor mistakes add up to 2.5 seconds over a lap. But hopefully I've been able to demonstrate that all of these small mistakes are pretty much the same ones as we have covered earlier in this video. But finding and identifying them yourself and then practicing will slowly allow you to overcome all of these mistakes and make it completely natural. And so hopefully I have been able to show you that all the time I gained and the time that Kulo lost was basically in the exits. And the only real reason that he was losing time on the exits is because he was overcooking it a little bit on the entry. And this is of course the fine balance that we are always trying to strike, carrying enough entry speed into the corner while also being able to maximize corner exit speed again. And this is literally what driving a car quickly, or rather racing, is all about. But of course, the previous section was mostly about 1 lap pace, and with 1 lap pace you can get a nice qualifying position, but if you want to finish races on the podium, you will also have to be consistent too. And so let's just review the practice session in its entirety, because a single lap time can tell a story, but about 5 consecutive laps, I could write a literal book. And so let's just go over what we are looking for here. And as you can see, my lap times were very progressive. The main priority here is that we didn't waste any laps. But a very nice bonus is that each lap was progressively quicker as well. This is essentially the golden standard. And while it is extremely difficult to actually do this if you don't already know the track, this is what you always should be aiming for. And now let's take a look at one of Kulo's practice sessions where he was overdriving a little bit. And as you can see, this time the lap times are pretty much all over the place. And while he did set his fastest lap of the session, I do have to give him that. So for a qualifying session, this would be pretty decent. But just imagine this would be your race pace, and suddenly you start having way bigger issues. And if we then compare this to an earlier session he did, as you can see it's a bit slower, but also it's a ton more consistent. And for a race pace this would be absolutely perfect. Because at this pace he has both proven to me and to himself that he can drive around safely and consistently. And so while the raw pace was lower than in the first session he had, I would say this session as a practice session is more successful. Simply because he got more effective, more repeatable repetitions in, which is the thing that will really teach you a track instead of just hot lap pace. And so hopefully you are now feeling up to practice a little bit yourself. If you can get any of the aforementioned games, I would highly recommend giving this combination of driving the Mazda MX-5 at Laguna Seca Raceway a shot. But even if you don't have access to any of those games or this track in particular, I have hopefully provided you with a philosophy that will work at any track. And if you're wondering about choosing a car because you cannot pick the MX-5, choose something slow. If you are driving lower powered cars, if you mess up the exit, that comes with a high penalty, and thus this will really allow you to focus on the fundamentals. If you want to be quick in these things, you have to drive efficient. So, pick a track, pick a car and go out there. Drive 5 or 6 laps, progressively building up speed while constantly focusing on your fundamentals. After finishing your session, review the replay and look if you are making any of the mistakes that I showed in the common mistakes section. Then either go do an online race or just go do something in real life, like touching grass for example, and drive another 5 laps. Again with the same style and then compare the lap times. Repeat this a few times until you are feeling comfortable with the track and you feel like you have set a nice banker time. Then give yourself a break from practice. Not only is sim racing a hobby and you deserve to take a break, it is also quite often remarkable what happens if you let your brain turn something that you learned into subconscious memory and then a few days later or a week later, whatever suits you, challenging yourself to a 5-lap hot lap stint in which you have to drive 5 laps in a row within 1 second of the time that you had set before taking a break. If you fail, no problem, reset, give yourself a break and try again. But if you succeed, congratulations, because you are now well on your way to become a well-versed racing driver. If you can bang in 5 consistent, quick laps, there's nothing stopping you from doing 10, 15, 30, whatever you want. And please, share your results in the comments. I would really love to know how you guys are doing with this challenge. And with that, we have finally finished our driving fundamentals block. Up next is driving technique. But from then on, I will be assuming that you will be able to drive consistently at a decent pace for at least 5 laps. So get out there, go practice. It will 100% take me a while to make part 3, so you will actually have a few weeks to practice. And please share your results and your progress in the comments below. I also quickly want to touch on the incredible reception that this course, the first part, has received. I've always had a passion for explaining stuff and teaching people things, and to be both able to combine this with sim racing and it actually seeming like my teaching material is helping a bunch of you guys is just honestly awesome and I could not ask for more. But honestly, I got much more than that. Because not only did we pass well beyond 100 likes, I almost didn't get a single dislike, which on YouTube these days, let's be honest, is absolutely incredible. But we also clocked in more than 1000 watch hours on just this one video. I seriously did not expect this and it still surprises me every time I actually look at it. I hope this second video will be as helpful to you guys. If it is, also let me know please. But if it isn't and you have any critiques or something to add maybe, please do let me know in the comments. I am very open to feedback, and even though I kind of know what I'm doing in terms of sim racing, I am still very much learning in terms of being a YouTuber. So if you have any advice or guidance on that, I am more than open to it. And before I ramble into eternity, I just want to tell you to get out there, practice, and with that, I have been OSW-Sim-Sports. Ciao!